Welcome to another recording. This is to help you with cumulative frequency. I'm going to look at a question here, take you through it, show you how you might do it. It's quite a quick summary. You may need to find a different video with a bit more detail. This is just for you to revise before the exam. So very quickly, let's just look at the first question. And the first question is about the cumulative frequency of the height of plants. And here we have their heights. So we've got 170 up to 175. Notice the difference there in the sign. You can't include 175 in this one, it'd have to go in that one. And these are the number of plants in each height group there. On the next slide, I've begun to do the question. I need to work out what the cumulative frequency is. So in the first group here, it's just 8, everything up to 75. In the second group, it's going to be everything up to 180, and down here in the table in this one here, they've said 170 up to 180. Well, that's going to be the 8 plus the 15. Now, often in the exam, you will just draw on your extra box here and write in the cumulative frequency as it goes, rather than having a separate table. But you can use that separate table if you want to. I've just down there, and I've added them up as I go. So 8 add 15 was 23, 23 add the 12 gave me 35, 35 add the 4 gave me 39, and then finally one more for the 40. I've now got my cumulative frequency drawn there. Okay, this next slide. As I've shown you here, I've got my cumulative frequency written down here. I've also done it in the table as you might do in the exam, where you'll have your cumulative frequency written there. You need to plot this on a graph. Now, it's really important that we plot everything up to 175 against the 8. So what I tend to do is just cross out cumulative frequency, cross out CF, cross out that first one there. And I'm going to plot this point against that point. Some teachers I've seen, and I quite like this, they will just put brackets around each of these points like so, so that you are then just going to plot these points like this. Okay, and that's exactly what I've done over here. So the first point was at 175, 8, 175, 8, 180, 23, 180, 23, and so on. When I've done that, I've drawn a nice smooth curve like that. Often there's a tail bit here that will make the curve look more like I'm tracing with the highlighter now, but for this particular question it just started here. Okay, so I've plotted my cumulative frequency graph. That's going to be worth about 3 points in an exam. The last bit of the question, estimate the median and IQR. The IQR is the interquartile range from a cumulative frequency graph. Okay, so to do that we've got our cumulative frequency graph, and on this one I've done that for you. So what I've done here is I found the median. Now there were 40 plants altogether. Half of that, the median will be 20. So I came across and I read off at 20. And I've marked it down here on a box and whisker type diagram. But the actual value I read off from the graph was 178.5. So that's my median is 178.5. I've also been asked to find the interquartile range. And that's the 25% and the 75% quartiles and the difference between them. And again, halfway, or 75% of the way up, is 30 out of 40 students. So I look up there, I read off my graph, and down there I got that to be 183. I then do the bottom quartile, which is the first 25% of students, read across, and I've said that's 176. The interquartile range, therefore, is the distance of this box here, which is 7. 183 take away 176 is 7. So the interquartile range is 7. What I have down here is called a box plot. And a box plot is a way of looking at how your data is spread out. I've got the median, the lower quartile, the upper quartile. That gives me the interquartile range, the distance or the width of that box. And I've got my highest value, and in this case my lowest value I was recording from 170. That is called a box plot. We're now going to go and look at some other questions about box plots, because that comes up a lot as well. And here I've just got a very simple summary for you. Here is my cumulative frequency curve. This is the total data. So from there I'm able to draw in the data I've got here. The median, the median here is my halfway mark, and look how it's dropped down to be that part of the box. The upper quartile comes to there, and that's the top bit of my box. The lower quartile, the bottom 25% students, is there. Now the range, I got this wrong on my previous graph, is we've got the top value, the most value there, is the top one, and they've actually here taken where the graph started from on this axis of 0 bit. Right, let's look at some questions to do with box plot. There's not a question here, but the question will be, use the box plot to compare the two box plots. Now when you're comparing the two box plots, you have to make 2 marks normally and 2 statements. One is about central tendency or average, and that will be where the median is. So the median is here. The other will be about the range, how spread out the data is. Now I've gone through and done this for you before. I'm just going to shrink that down a little bit to give us a little bit more space. Let's do that there. Okay, so for this question, if it was asking you to compare the 2 box plots, you would need to make a comparative statement, which I have done here. Okay. It says the average person is better able to remember when music is playing. Okay, so this is how many items you can remember from a list if you remember the list listening to music or with no music. And clearly here, the average person, the median person, is able to remember more when music is being played than when it's not. So I've commented about the average person. That's worth 1 mark. I've now got to comment about the consistency or the spread of the people. And as we can see in this graph here, people are more consistent when there is no music. They're not so spread out. The difference between the middle 50% of people, say from the 25% mark up to the 50% mark, covers less distance. It's between 6 and 8 things to remember, whereas here it's been 7 and 10. So you're more consistent if you haven't got music playing, but you are less likely to be good at remembering in the first place. So my comment here is, however, the interquartile range is higher, so people are less consistent. My technique for the exam is just mention the word consistent. If you talk about the consistency, the narrower the block, the more consistent, the wider the block, the less consistent. You'll get the mark. Okay, let's look at the next question we have for you here. So we're comparing 2 sets of data again, and for these 2 sets of data, we were just talking about the difference between students in set A and students in set B. Okay, if I was asked to compare those 2, I've done my statement again. It says here, the average, brackets median, the average student in set B is better than the average student in set A. That's because that median mark, the middle of your box and whisker, is higher. That's 1 mark. I then said both sets of data are similarly consistent as both the range and interquartile range are the same. So this distance here is very similar to that distance. This range distance is very similar to that range distance. In the exam, you could get a ruler and measure that if you wished, or you could get a tracing paper and copy it across. If anything, I think set A may be slightly more, but generally they're very consistent. This was a 2-part question. That was the first part, and then they asked you to compare a second set of data against that. And if you look at this second set of data, you'll see what I mean about how different they are. Now, looking at this question here, there is a much bigger difference in these boxes. That's really quite small compared with that box. So let's see what the comment for this one would be. Let's move that away. I have said, the average person in set A is better than set B because the median is higher. The average person in set A, the median there is 11, whereas here it's 10. So the average person in set A is better than the average person in set B. However, set A students are far less consistent. They're less consistent because that box is much bigger. They're more spread out. A students are far less consistent. Their range is a little higher. Well, I talked about the whole range, so this here is a little bit higher than that there. And their interquartile range, this box here, is considerably higher. That would definitely get me 2 marks. Very quick recap. We are talking when we're doing box and whiskers about comparing first one statement about the median, the average student, and then the second mark comes from talking about the interquartile range or the range, and that is about your consistency. Good luck with those questions in the exam.